Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I want to take you behind the scenes of how I design my ships in Space Engineers. This isn't just going to be a tutorial, it's going to be a look at my personal creative process. From gathering inspiration from a mood board at the start, to experimenting with shapes and ideas, to finally bringing it all together inside of the game. I'll share the steps that I follow to create ships that feel uniquely mine. For me, designing a ship isn't just about building something purely functional, it's about creating something special and unique that I'm excited to fly and proud to call my own. By the end of this video, you'll see the ship that I've been working on for the past few days come to life from nothingness into something special, and hopefully you'll get a sense of what inspires my designs. Let's get started. And if you like my video so far, please don't hesitate to like, subscribe and comment on this video. This channel is very new and I would appreciate every small boost of engagement I can get. Thank you very much. Enjoy the video. Alright, so this is my new ship that I've created for this channel, the BP Mu. It took me roughly 7 or 8 hours to complete from start to finish. A lot of that was walking around and assessing what I should do for the next section of it. So a lot of my time wasn't actually spent building, it was spent imagining what I'm going to be doing for it. So we'll start on the outside. We've got an armoured bridge, nice and protected from any sort of small arms fire you may encounter, with some stair blocks as a little bit greeble. A recessed main bridge for all of the crew, so again they'll be nice and protected from either flying really fast or from, weaponry. We've got this little design on the front. This is actually based off another ship that I saw on the internet, and I took a few little design inspirations from it, but it's not overly based off it, because once I get into the flow, start doing my own thing, I can sort of work out the rest on my own. Coming over to the center of the ship, we've got some nice paneling with some batteries behind, a little bit of darker material recessed inside. Got some more thrusters behind some of these nice little plating blocks. I really like these blocks for hiding thrusters. They just add a lot more support and health to the ship. Up here, around this nice octagonal access port to the entrance, we've got a little trim around it made of the armor panels, supported by some ground down heavy armor blocks. I used heavy armor because the light armor doesn't have these vertical struts, and I thought that the heavy armor would look slightly nicer with a little bit more volume to it. Across here you can see I've got more of the layered paint design with white highlights on the edge. I've actually got more of these little ridges, these little shark fins. I think they look quite cool. They just add a little bit of texture to it. I've got these dark sections. I imagine these are some sort of communications equipment that I imagined. I mean, they're completely useless, but they do look quite cool, I think. In here you can actually see the refinery. Well, you can see that on each side. You can see the refinery with the modules attached to it, just to give it a little bit more processing ability, in case you're docking a small miner to this ship. We've got some exposed gyroscopes down the bottom here. You can see the jump drives. Up here, I used more ground down armor blocks so you can see into the thruster section behind, and actually into engineering through there. You can see the catwalks inside of engineering. I used the new piping blocks because I think they look pretty cool when situated near thrusters. They really tie the design together, and you can it's good to imagine how things would actually work if it was in real life. So these conveyors right behind here are effectively useless in Space Engineers, but because it looks like they're supplying the hydrogen thrusters, it just ties the design together so much better. Up here we've got more white trim along the orange, which again is just a nice little bit of detail. Got these little nubbins sticking out, little things. They don't really do much, they're just there for obviously more decoration, and it does help to just see other people's ones of these. So I actually got this from a workshop ship that I saw, and it may seem small, but the small things add up, and the more small things you have on the ship, the nicer the design will be when it's tied together. Over here we've got some heat vents. I set these to always on, but you could, if you want, set them to be activated when the ship gets to a certain power consumption, like when it's charging its jump drives. That could be a pretty cool idea. Underneath these catwalks, I've just got some greeble made of some power efficiency modules. I really like the modules from the refinery as greeble. You can use them in other parts of the ship as well, but I just use them here because I think they look nice. Over here, I set these lights to have one or the minimum radius and maximum brightness, so when you're far away it looks, and it's nighttime, it looks like they're sort of guiding you into land. And I got that from just looking at airports, pictures of some airports, and my memory of being on a plane, and it just helps a little to add these little real world design elements. We also got lots of freight storage around the landing pad. We've got a ton of barrels here, and we've got another crate over here. This obviously just adds a little bit of character and a little bit of realism to the pad. And then we got some of these. I saw someone else use these as a docking port. I put them here because I thought they looked quite nice as a little guiding in port, similar to Elite Dangerous. Anyway, we've also got these floodlights which just illuminate the pad when it's nighttime. I can show you what it looks like when the sun's offset. I think it looks really cool when it's just illuminating the spot. So you can imagine when you've got your ship parked here, it's going to be really atmospheric and interesting. These lights, they just track any sort of flying object around, just so they've got an easier time landing. Coming down to the rear thruster pack, this I spent a lot of time on, and this is actually my favourite thruster pack I've designed for quite a while for a ship of this sort of size. It helps to wrap around the shape of the thrusters. You can see I've used all these angled blocks to try and get as close to the circle as possible. You can see it doesn't really work on some parts of this place, but you can't really put blocks here because it's, space engineers. But it does help just a little bit to get these little angles here. I could actually put something on this flat bit here, but I do find it helps to have some flat areas on your ship, like here too. You don't need to cover every single part of the vehicle in detail. That actually detracts from it, and there are some workshop ships which quite subscribe that I believe have too much detail on them, so I try to keep it to a reasonable amount, because otherwise it just looks too busy and the design is not as cohesive. Down on the bottom you can see I actually flipped the ship the other way up while designing it to make sure that the bottom looked nice, which is something that I tend to forget and a lot of other people do. The bottom is a very neglected part of the ship, and you can see I've used some more stairs. Stairs I think are really cool. Instead of using the 2x1 base blocks, stairs are a nice little change from it. They look like some sort of heat vent again, or some sort of grating. And over here, yes, we've got the railings. Oh, artificial gravity almost turned me upside down. We've got the gratings around it just to make sure that it's not really, again, it doesn't serve any real purpose. It's not like you're going to fall in. You're not going to be under here without a jetpack. But it just helps to serve as a little bit more greeble and a little bit more detailing, a little bit of thruster cowling. And you can see around the thrusters in the bottom half, I've actually used about 3 or 4 different light armor textures, just to make it look like it's a little bit more weathered by being under the heat loads. And you can see on real life space shuttles, on their black bottom, which is actually a type of ceramic tiling which protects from heat, it's there's a lot of variation in the colour, just because it's been exposed to the elements so much, and I think that sort of details really ties the design together. It just looks a lot better than if it was one colour. On the comms array, I have used the new DLC block. I think this looks really cool. It looks like a 5G tower. It's a lot of the new blocks. They are really, really detailed, and I do love them. And oftentimes they don't actually fit so much within the vanilla version, so you do have to use some other DLC blocks just to keep them away from the less detailed blocks, so they actually look cohesive. It's like the new camera mount. I used this camera because I decided that the new camera just looked ridiculous. It just looks so out of place in modern space engineers when compared to the old blocks. Like, look at it. Look at how detailed it is compared to the armor block. It just makes no sense to me. But if I had more of the new blocks around here, it could look better. Over here, parabolic antenna. I like the new parabolic antenna. Looks very nice, and I've used some exhaust pipes that turned off for a little bit more detail. I only managed to get 2 guns on this whole ship, and that was because I wasn't really designing it as a combat ship from the start. And when you do that, you have to take guns into account very early on in the design phase, about the same time as you put the thrusters and the large hydrogen tanks and big components in. because they such an important design consideration. You have to have them ready early on. Like, I maybe would have made these sections 1 or 2 blocks taller, so it would have been from here to here instead of here, and then I would be able to put some turrets on the sides here. But I did not do that, and that is because I wasn't thinking of it early on enough in the design. I also have included some exposed conveyor tubes. I could have had these the other way round, but I thought, again, I just thought it looked a little bit nicer to have these exposed functional blocks. If you're doing a combat ship, obviously you won't want this, but this is not designed for space combat, so it's alright to have that. Again, more conveyor tubes underneath some glass. These actually do something, can't remember what they do. You can find out if you take this off the workshop. Over here we've got a little viewport inside of the ship. I really like having viewports into the ship because it just adds some natural lighting if you're towards the sun, and you know, it just adds a lot more realism, and it's a lot more interesting to be inside. Over here you can see I've used the new DLC blocks to cover up thrusters. You could equally use ground down armor panels, doesn't really matter. I just used these because I thought they were interesting and I wanted to use them. Down at the front you can see large cargo container. This is the only large cargo container on the ship, so it's not got a huge amount of space, but you know, it's got a respectable amount. It's enough for your light cargo missions. Alright, moving on to the inside. We'll come in through the port side airlock. As soon as you enter the airlock, you've got some fauna behind some glass. Little tree for if you need to hug it when you come inside. Break glass, hug tree. We've got suit up station. Always one of these in an airlock in case you need to fix your suit. Coming down here into the main section of the ship. We've got the other half of the airlock door. I couldn't fit the door upstairs, so I just put it downstairs. I don't think it matters too much. We've got a medical bay, nice and close. I like to have these close to an exit because it just means if you're spawning in, you can get out the ship faster, or if you're low on health or low on oxygen, you can quickly get into the ship and heal as fast as possible. Coming towards the back of the ship, the rear, the stern, the bow, whatever, can't remember my names of ships. We've got a gravity generator, giant floor-to-ceiling fan with some of the new blocks to access the cargo. This will connect to every single container on the ship. A few cargo racks. You can actually fix the generator with the gravity components from this. Also, I don't understand. Never mind. Through here, access panel, more access panels. I really like these blocks. They just add so much life and character to a ship. We've got some of these event controllers in case you want to add events. Like, for example, when you dock and undock, you could set it to put your tanks and your batteries to stockpile and recharge. I haven't done that because a lot of people like to have their ships differently, and it can be frustrating or sometimes spooky if your ship's doing things without you noticing. Up here we've got more suit-up stations for when you exit that airlock, and a nice captain's desk, very nice new block. And you can come out here onto the landing pad, very atmospheric. Alright, coming back to the front of the ship, we've got upstairs here, we have the crew compartment. This is where the crew will be spending their time relaxing on their long interstellar voyages. Through here you've got a basic sanitary complex, you've got a toilet, shower. Over here you've got cryostasis chambers in case you need to rest for a long journey. We've got kitchen, microwave and an oven just in case you need to cook some snacks on your way. Chair here, television, very fancy television. You can see we've even got two little Steam Deck knockoffs here, very nice. Over here, bookshelf to keep all your books in case you need to read before bed, and some saltwater and freshwater fish mixed together. These things are going to die very fast. And skylight, very comfy. And now the pièce de résistance, bridge of the ship. Now the bridge is not just a bridge, it's actually a cargo bay. So you can load up your cargo through these hatches here. I assume it's usually going to be a small ship because it's quite a tight squeeze and difficult to get large things through. So you can just plop it through these hangar doors up here. And right in here you can park it, have a little ship to walk past as you get to the cockpit of the ship. Now this bridge, I'm actually quite happy with it. I used the new interior blocks as the ceiling, and I used the light panel and the new holographic LCD. This I'm very proud of this place. It's quite a nice little bridge, you know. Very armoured, very interesting to look out of. You can see the planet down there. Right here, cockpit. Let's get inside. Let's have a look at the manoeuvrability of this thing. So, quite fast acceleration. I've got, with those 3 large thrusters and 3 small thrusters, you can pick up speed at a blistering pace. Slowing down is a bit slow. You've only got a few thrusters in reverse, but you don't really need them. You can always flip and burn. The manoeuvrability is there, so you're not going to be crashing into anything by mistake with this ship. Sideways thrust, much slower, to be expected. You don't really need it for anything more than docking anyway. It's not particularly necessary for general space flight. Downwards thrusters, I gave those a little bit more oomph because there was space and I could. And upwards thrust is one of the largest ones as well, because if you're flying near a gravity well, you do not want to get sucked down, especially considering there are no parachutes on this thing. Anyway, very nice little ship. 4,000 kilometers jump range, stays underneath the max weight for that. It's got the camera, very useful. And yeah, all around, I think it's a very balanced and very appealing to look at ship. I personally would not build this in survival. Although it is survival ready, it doesn't really fulfill a purpose. It doesn't have enough refineries and assemblers to act as a mobile base, and it doesn't have enough landing pads and connectors to act as a carrier. But this ship was more of an exercise in design and making an interesting looking vessel than making one that I would use in my own games. To start off with, I just go straight into Google and I search for some different sci-fi spacecraft ideas. So you can pretty much search anything into the internet, but you'll get lots of different ideas for what you can use. And once you've found something you like, all you have to do, put it in. I sometimes like to add a little bit of text describing what it's about, and just a few short adjectives on how the ship's design makes me feel, and that gives me a little bit more of just a quick insight. I like which ones will be doing what things. So for example, the blue ones on the left might be a racing ship, or the one on the bottom right might be some sort of heavy warship. The one I really like though, I really like this one right here. It just really sings out to me, and I think I could do the shape quite well in Space Engineers. So this is me in the future talking right now. In this short sped up video, you'll be able to see what I'm doing as I'm designing the ship. So to start off with, I'm just mapping out the basic shape. It's going to be quite a rough sketch. It's not going to be exactly perfect, and I don't really mind if it's perfect or not, because this is a sketch. And you can see that this first design does end up in the final product, and this is just me copying the front half of that ship from the picture. I don't really know what I'm doing at this point, so I'm just sort of placing armor blocks, hoping it'll look good. If it doesn't look good, I can go back and change it. It doesn't matter. You can see I've already widened the hull by quite a few blocks at the start. And I'm thinking I can take the layered armor pattern they've got on the screenshot from the DeviantArt guy, and I can incorporate that into my design. So I'm creating a backdrop of armor with these sort of panels on top of it. And this creates a lot of depth, which I can then exacerbate by putting a little bit of paint on it at the very end. And it should end up looking quite nice. And I continue on, just sort of building up the shape, I'm trying to think about where my thrusters will go. So I'll need to have some nacelles to stick out on the side, because I don't want the thrusters on the front of the ship. I want them sticking out. I don't want them there. I want my bridge on the front. So on the sides, I'm adding these bits in the hopes that I can put some thrusters on them. And again, I'm trying to keep the same sort of design elements congruent throughout the ship. So I've got the same sort of 2x1 slope pattern on the edges of most of my further sticky out bits, just to try and tie the design together. It's good to have these consistencies throughout your ship because it allows it to be much more pleasingly followed by the eye. Over here, I start trying to add on the final bits of the nacelles, which you can see in the picture, and it takes me a few tries, and I'm trying to get the shape right, but it always comes out looking too circular. And this is the problem in Space Engineers. We only have two different angles of slope: 45 degrees and 12.5 degrees, or whatever, 25 degrees ish. And it's not really that great for making these sorts of interesting angles. I could do some ribbing here, but I decided against it, and I actually ended up just deleting these nacelles entirely. And this is the point of it. This is what you do with your ship. You take someone else's design and you can use that as a template to start with, but as you build, you'll start to get ideas of your own, and it will slowly morph into your own creation of your own. Over here, I really wanted to get some thrusters in the side, kind of like the Malevolence from the Clone Wars. It would have been really cool, but it just didn't sit right with me. So I go through quite a few different iterations of what I want to put there, because I know I want to put something there. So I leave it, and I decide to come back to it later because I can't think of it right now. Right here, I'm just sort of designing the thruster housing. You can see that ribbing, that becomes the ground down armor texture at the very end. So I do end up sort of rolling with that, but it doesn't. Not all the blocks here are final. A lot of these blocks do change. Again, trying to fit the thruster in. Right here, I end up just adding a circle because I think that looks quite decent. And I don't really know, at this point I don't know I'm going to put an airlock there. I just think maybe I'll put one or two thrusters in there, but as long as there's something there, it'll be a nice thing to work with. Over here, I figure out I can hide some thrusters with some cowling down here. And at the front, I just open the bridge up a little bit. Right here, as you can see, I was talking about, I put in a thruster just to see how it would look. It doesn't look that great. Past me should be ashamed of himself. At the back, I put in some thrusters, all these vertical ones. You do have to think about your thruster placement quite early in the design, as I'm doing right here, because they're an integral part of the ship, especially if you're using hydrogen, because it's just so important. You can't, if you build a ship without accounting for thrusters, you'll end up with a very unmaneuverable ship that's not very useful for anything. So you do want to think about them quite early. The smaller thrusters don't matter so much because you can hide them, and I've done that with some ships in the past, but it just makes so much more sense to think about your thruster placement before you've done all of the decoration and all of the interior and the gubbins and stuff. You can think about the conveyors a little bit later because you might want to work them around interior aspects of your design. For example, you might want to have exposed ones, or you might want to have them hidden in the ceiling, and I didn't know at this point, so I just decided to leave them out and just kind of guess if there was enough space for having them. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but this is just how I was doing my ship. At the bottom, I made the comms array quite early because I just wanted to have a little fun with it. I designed the thruster pack here. This is just a basic sketch, but it actually ended up turning out to be the final thruster pack design, so I was quite happy with that. You can see here I experimented with adding some guns to it. This is the stage in the design where you should be adding the guns, but I decided not to, and by the time I wanted to, I'd left it far too late. So at this stage in the design, you should be adding your guns if you want to make a proper combat-capable ship. So yes, experimenting. I did leave some Gatling guns where I ended up putting the outside exterior viewing windows, but I ended up taking them out. Over here, I put a little cutaway because I thought it would look cool. I actually ended up moving that to the bottom of the ship later because I thought it looked a little bit disgusting. You can see I experimented more with the bridge. It does take a few iterations of design to try and get something that actually looks decent, because it's so hard in Space Engineers to guess in your head. And so this is the same with sketching in real life. You do many sketches, and then you settle on the one you like most, and that's what I'm essentially doing here. I'm essentially sketching inside of the game. You can see I'm using different types of blocks just to see what it looks like. I do end up putting in some. I'm thinking about placing the console blocks here. I know I want to use them, and at this point, there we go, got the floor. Trying to choose which block I want for the floor. A lot of the design is just doing things and then redoing it until you get something that looks nice. I wouldn't be a perfectionist. I've had this been told to me about many things, not even just Space Engineers, about things in my life. Just make sure that you get something down. It helps a lot just to get something down, and then you can come back to it later when you've got a fresh head, and sometimes you actually might think it looks rather nice. Here, this is where I decided to put an airlock in, so I put the airlock in. Over here, experimenting with adding more thrusters. I didn't really prioritise sideways thrust on this ship because I thought it wasn't necessary and it looked ugly. Down here you can see I did, on the bottom of the ship I actually did experiment with some nice little thruster housing designs, and I would take these for your own designs. I stole these from other people. That's what Space Engine is about. You just steal the design concepts from other people and you add them to your own ship, and it always ends up looking nice because other people are smarter than me and you. Still adding thrusters. I ended up deciding to copy the paint job from the initial ship. I continued painting the ship for quite a while. Most of this stuff is me painting for a little bit, and I'm just trying to get a sense of how it's going to feel. So I do end up changing the thruster nacelles a little bit here, and you can see what I'm doing. I'm doing what I said earlier. I make them a little bit more cohesive with the rest of the design and add a little bit more of a layer, just so that it ties in a little bit better, because I didn't think it was flowing that great. I then added some white highlights, which I thought looked quite nice. These just help up to break up the design a little bit, and it's always good to have about 2, 3 or 4 colours for your spacecraft. It can vary a little bit, but that's generally what I like to stick for the main body of it. I then experimented with painting the landing pad, just adding a few little touches here and there. I end up changing quite a lot of this, but it's always good to just keep on chopping and changing and seeing what everything's like. I then add in a little nameplate, the Moo, and I also go and try and I'm just looking at the workshop trying to find some other ships, because this is the greebling stage. I wanted to add some greeble and I didn't know what to add, so I just went pasted in some workshop ships and then got some ideas from them. And on my other screen I've got some more ships opened up that I'm just looking at and taking little cues from, which can help an absolute ton. I continue working on adding detail. A lot of the rest of this is detailing, so I won't go into too much detail because this is a lot of this bit you have to do sort of on your own, and I can't really hold your hand with the greebling part, because a lot of it is based off techniques that you've learned from seeing other people's ships and working on ship yourself and discovering things. So I added on these little trims here. I saw this on someone else's ship, and I showed the Factorum ships, and I think it looks just beautiful having these little trims everywhere, because it really adds an extra. It pretty much doubles the resolution, because you can have them be 4 times smaller than a normal block. So yes, double resolution. It's like using blocks that are 4 times smaller. On the thrusters, I would definitely take note of this. You can use putting cowling around them. It always makes it look better. It's just a really interesting thing that you can add on. I also experimented with using these heavy industry blocks, because they just make it look a little bit more industrial and a little bit more lived in, if that makes sense. I also added some quarter panels around the nameplate, because it's a little checkers never hurt anyone, right? I then hired some functional blocks inside of the body of the ship, because functional blocks always look good. They often have a higher detail than armor blocks, so you do want to get a lot of them in the design as much as possible. I then decide on how I want the landing pad to be. I put some railings around it so you don't fall off the edge into the thrusters and cook yourself alive. And I put a little ramp down into an airlock. I then add some lights, some barrels, some cargo, etc., just to make it feel lived in, you know. It's a lot more realistic to have these sorts of things around your pads. Of course, I experiment with new blocks. I've never actually used these truss blocks before, so a new thing for me. I just experiment with how I can use them. Because I've not used them, obviously, I don't know what they're good for, so I'm just trying out different things, little techniques, just to see what I like and what I don't like. I then add another antenna dish because it's a new antenna dish. I've got to use it, and I think it looks rather cool. I then realise I've got no cargo storage, so I add on some cargo storage, and it's nice to have them exposed like that because the industrial cargo container does look quite good. Then adding a few more exposed gyroscopes. There will be more internally, but the exposed ones are just there for detailing mostly. I then experiment with some more detailing. A lot of sketching in Space Engineers, a lot of that. I then change this to flow a little bit more around. It's nice to have the curves follow each other. It just looks a little bit more professional and a little bit more together. I then decide to add little windows everywhere. I experiment with a few types. I consider leaving the gun against the windows, but eventually I do not do that because it just doesn't look as nice as having them on their own. Here I'm adding the floodlights, and at this point I'm thinking about adding spotlights, but I put that thought to the back of my mind and focused on something else because I was getting bored of that section. I realised I can use the new wall blocks as roofs, and it looks pretty epic when they're used as roofs. So a lot of the rest of this is just me making the interior and detailing it, and a lot of that is stuff you have to learn on your own. So for that I would recommend download this ship off the workshop, download other ships off the workshop, and have a look around them, because you may just get some ideas for your own interior. Like for example, around this corridor I've actually used, let me just delete this, I've actually got some space around it, and this is because I wanted to have these LCDs behind the windows, and I also use this block here so I can have a nice little corridor going through the other bits. And the interior is one of the hardest parts of ship design, so you will need to learn by yourself, because every ship is different and it's hard for everyone. The interior took me about 4 out of the 8 hours I spent on this ship, and it was just an absolute feat, and I didn't even finish it. There's not a lot to make in the engineering section, but you know, I disregarded that. No one goes down here anyway. You can make some really cool looking industrial rooms, but I just didn't have time for that. And yeah, just look at other people's ships, walk around them, watch some YouTube videos for ship showcases. For example, like Captain Jack's and Last Anchors. And also they all review the ships they review are almost always top of the right line ones that you could absolutely get some great inspiration from. So good luck with your ship making. This has been the Moon Man, and I'm out. See you later.